go out to Portland, Oregon, and talk to Rich. Hey, Rich, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Rocking and rolling, man. What about you?
Doing okay.
What's up?
Reason I'm calling today is my wife and I have been married for a little over a year now. We have a three and a half month old son, and recently she's bipolar too, and she started going through a hypomanic episode, which coming into the marriage I really had very little idea of what sort of things kind of surrounded bipolar too. But as a result of it, she decided to kind of start her own business, and then opened up some credit cards without my knowledge, and then spent about $7,000 to $8,000, and then was running around missing most of the day while I was home. Fortunately, I worked from home, but I was home alone taking care of our 3.5-month-old son. But I'm kind of at a point where she's gotten a little bit better. It's kind of de-escalated in the last couple of weeks, but some of the financial stuff is still out there, and so I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I should be doing and how to be better prepared for when this happens again the next time.
Oh man, there's a lot here. Really quick for the audience, bipolar 2 is a relatively become a relatively common diagnosis, and it's different than bipolar 1 from something they call hypomania, which means the ups, the manic phase, the phase where people stay up for 3 or 4 days, and that goes on for weeks, and then they collapse, and they're back up at it, and they spin recklessly, or they will just go have a ton of romantic partner. It looks different for everybody, but it's just a bzzz. Hypomanic means it's not quite as high. It's not quite as manic. The other part that usually accompanies bipolar 2 is the depression phase is often deeper. It's a darker hole, right? So what you're describing... Rich, I have a lot of thoughts and opinions, some of which are going to get me in trouble. Is it okay if I just kind of lay them all out in a row?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I like to, this isn't always 100% accurate, but it helps me, okay? So feel free to not use this if it doesn't help you. I don't like to say anxiety caused this, or depression caused this, or bipolar made this, because that infers that we live completely robotic lives. And I know several, some of them very closely, BP1 and bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 folks who have created worlds for themselves where they take their meds, where they do a lot of work upstream, and when they do enter into a really dark phase or a high phase, they got a plan. So what I don't want you to do is to just look at like, oh gosh, this is the next 7 years of my life. This is just going to happen at some random moment. You're going to get a call like, hey, your wife bought 7 cars and she started a car business. That's not necessarily deterministic that way.
Right.
So I would love you to say, well, my wife has been diagnosed at some point with bipolar 2. And
my wife,
she recently did X, Y, or Z.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? And so I want that's going to empower. My hope is that it empowers you and gives you some, all right, let's do this. That's different than, oh, this is just going to be what this is. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, how long did y'all date before you got married?
For about 2 years.
And there was never an episode, never any sort of anything like this? You never experienced any of it?
No, I had not. The closest we had was earlier this year. Her brother also has bipolar, and he went through a similar episode. So we at least had a little bit of it, but even then I didn't really kind of know what was going on. I was basically kind of third party, just hearing about everything.
Okay.
But I know she had several years ago gone through another episode, and I've heard from her family what kind of precipitated from that. But
Was it also a reckless spending and borrowing episode as well?
Spending and actions, yeah. There was, like, she got a tattoo as a result of it, and decided kind of out of nowhere just to get like a haircut, which was, on the surface, nothing bad.
Just very impulsive.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
All right. So I'm going to give you a recommendation that I fight against all of the time. And in 99.99% of the time, I think is the wrong move, but I think it's the right move for you right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. What your wife needs, what you need, what your household needs right now is you to be able to find footing and to drop your shoulders so that y'all can do what you got to do coming forward. And you will not be able to do that, I don't believe, until you know y'all are safe. And so I think the smart thing to do right now is to move your money into an account where you can make sure the four walls are covered. Your housing is taken care of. Your utilities are taken care of. You can get gas money and you get food. Okay?
Yeah, fortunately, I've already done that.
Good. Okay.
Did that kind of early on, yeah.
Okay. I think couples who split their finances, I think that's a terrible idea, except in this situation. Okay? Step number 2, is she still burning through cars, or is the light starting to come back on? Like, oh no. Because usually that's accompanied by some pretty intense shame that then kicks in the black hole phase.
No, she has the stuff that can be returned that wasn't like goods, and that was services that we can't return, but the goods, some of it has gotten returned. Some of it we've found out we really can't return. But we are kind of in the process of getting all that. And then we're hoping kind of by the end of the month to be somewhat close to the other kind of shoe to drop on it was that we have, before all this, we had been saving for a house. And so we do have about $40,000 saved up in savings for the house that we were going to basically just turn around and use that to pay on the card so that they didn't gather any sort of interest at all.
Sure. But can you get, she ran up, what, 8,000 or 9,000, so could she just pay them off?
Basically that's going to be the plan at this point, is to just pay them off before the.
I would not do that unless she agrees to freeze her credit. Okay. So that if there's another impulsive moment, that it's very challenging to go forward.
Okay.
And here's what we have to do moving forward. We have to create with her. You can't do this for her because you're not her dad, you're her husband. She has to be willing to put hurdles in her path so that if she ends up acting very impulsively, or ends up hurdles also for people who are struggling with major depressive disorder, right? Or they are in a depressive episode. Maybe not have any guns in the house. Maybe don't. There is a number everywhere for somebody to call. We have a check-in program that we've practiced, right? That there is. I'm going to put some things in place so that. I want to tell you, I don't have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. Nothing of the sort. And I also am pretty impulsive. So there's been seasons in my life when I gave my debit card to my wife. I didn't have access to my own checking account because I needed some time to cool off. And that was just me being a responsible adult. Okay? There's most of the time, I do not have junk food candy in my house because I eat all of it. And I know that I should be disciplined, and I know that I know all that. It's often easier for me just to not have it in the house. And I've made peace with that. That's okay. And so it's about her deciding, I want to be an adult and never put myself, my family in this position again. And I've got some different challenges than other people, so I'm going to put some hurdles in front of me. Would she be willing to do that? Or is she not even in a place to have that conversation yet?
Probably not yet. Right now she doesn't even see the stuff as debt. Her philosophy is that it's not actually debt until interest starts accruing on it. So we're still kind of fighting the whole actually just using credit cards to begin with. But so it might be, and considering she has started to kind of calm down, but kind of seeing just how still active she is with the idea of wanting to start her own business and whatnot.
If you think she can, I mean, I don't know that you have the deterministic like that, but if y'all decide starting a business is right for your young family, for her, great. Let's just do it the right way.
Yeah, and we have tried to tell her that between myself and her parents, and there's been pushback, but for the most part, our message has always been exactly that. It's just start off slow and scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she wants to go and buy she wants to start a cafe is her idea. So,
okay. So I always recommend when somebody wants to start a restaurant or a coffee shop or open a bar, go spend 2 years working in a cafe, day in and day out. Sometimes where we love to go spend time together, it's a totally different experience. Curating that experience for somebody else to enjoy their time because you're working, right? But all I have to say is that those conversations may fall on deaf ears, but I think they're at least worth sitting down and having. I think ultimately you're going to have to decide, or she's going to have to decide, do I want to be well or not well? And there is pharmaceutical interventions, especially in combination with therapeutic interventions, right? Is she seeing somebody?
No, not specifically right now. In the midst of all this, we did go to the ER and they did adjust her meds. Okay. So we do have her on something that's supposed to be helping her with the hypomania specifically.
I think you'll need to go spend some time with a marriage counselor.
Okay.
And not just a run-of-the-mill one, but I would find a psychologist or somebody who's trained working with couples, but also with mental health disorders. Okay. And or somebody who's struggling with a very particular thing. And there are therapists that are excellent with couples in bipolar, excellent with couples in borderline personality disorder, which is very challenging. Couples in OCD. So there's therapists that are really excellent at helping couples draw boundaries, helping couples draw up plans so that we can move forward. What I hear in your voice, and you just may be a super chill, like make your own granola, Portland kind of guy, but I hear in your voice, you almost have already given up. Or you're just tired.
I think it's more the latter. I'm just exhausted.
Okay.
Trying to fight and whatnot for what feels like a month now. Okay. Actually, probably has been over a month now. It's just...
What are you fighting? Because let me tell you this. In a manic phase, there's no learning. So there's like having a conversation about, hey, you know what, you should probably go to bed. It's almost a conversation not worth having. Or, hey, debt is actually this. This isn't that moment for that conversation. It's more, hey, honey, when we as a couple owe somebody money, I can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
When we as a couple have to pay for a restaurant that we haven't even opened yet, we haven't done the math on how many cups of coffee we actually have to sell just to pay the light bill on that thing, much less the overhead, much less the cafe staff. I don't sleep. I don't breathe. I don't digest my food. I think that's where we start. And that's different than starting with math, starting with, hey, this is actually the definition of debt. Hey, you shouldn't scale this so much. It is, do you love me enough to not hurt me? Because right now, your actions hurt. They're scaring me to death. And if you love me just that much, that's a good place where we can start.
Right.
That's the only way I've seen things be effective. I've rarely ever seen somebody win with a math problem or a definition problem or something like that. But I think you guys got to get a marriage counselor that's going to help you as she comes down. And I think once the manic phase is over, I think getting meds readjusted again is probably pretty important, especially if she just got meds to deal with the mountaintop. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think you have to look at the entire picture of your marriage. I don't want you to cast this thing off as this is going to be the rest of your life, or it has to be the rest of your life. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. She can make some choices, and y'all can make some choices together where this is not deterministic. Go ahead, Kelly.
I have a question.
Yes.
So we had a call earlier in the week about bipolar 1 and now bipolar 2. That's why I asked you to explain it a little. But I know for most of us, it's just terms we don't get. So I'm wanting to know. So it sounds like in one, the highs are higher and the lows are lower. Is that it? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes. My understanding is the bipolar 1 is the intensity is much greater. And in bipolar 2, the highs aren't quite as high, but often is accompanied by a lower low. And so that's often the diagnostic is pretty subjective, right? And with all due respect, a lot of times bipolar 2 is just something they throw. Like, I feel all over the place and I feel really excited sometimes. I feel really low sometimes. I can just put bipolar 2 on there and call it. And so it is I think it's one of the most overdiagnosed diagnostics. And I've met some folks where it's very real, right? Where it's very, very real. That's why you just got to be honest about it. If this is what you got, it's what you got. Similar, like I struggle with X, Y, and Z. I still got to be at work on time. So I have to create a world where I can be on work on time.
So it's kind of the same thing, just different degrees of the symptoms to a point?
For non-nerds, yes.
Okay. And yeah that's
so hyper means a lot, more. Right? And hypo means like the mountaintop is curved. It's more of a hill than a mountain.
Okay.
Right? It is rarer than a hypomanic phase for somebody to go on a spinning burnout like this. That's what makes me wonder if there's more to it than that. Or if this is just like a very determined, very, very like we're going forward. Or if there's a long family history here. That's why like when someone's listening saying, why don't you ask this, why don't you ask this? I think most of these questions for Rich and his wife are going to be for a counselor because there's going to be some nuance here that's going to be.
When he said that the Manic had been over a month at this point, I guess I never thought that they lasted that long because never been around anybody.
Yeah, that makes
Does that vary?
That in my estimation is a long time.
Okay, because that does seem exhausting.
It's a long time for a bipolar 2 hypomanic phase. But again, I'm not an expert on it. There may be moments when they last that long. That seems like a very, very long time from my experience. But again, there's experts out there. If you are a bipolar 2, bipolar 1 expert, and you've got some opinions on that, please write in. And I'd love to read out like, hey, if you're a clinician and you're a psychologist and you are navigating this and your specialty is bipolar 1 and 2, man, I would love if you want to provide some clarity. We'll read it. If you write in, I'll be happy to read that out just for folks listening. But that's a great question. But again, here's the bigger picture for 99.9% of us. Those level of details, I think, are only important if you use them as limiting factors. And what I mean by that is, I'll just use this in my house. If I'm going to use my son has no mental health disorders whatsoever. He's an amazing young man. I'm just using him for an example. If he was really struggling and I took him to a child psychologist who then did a workup on him and said, hey, your child has bipolar 1. And then I took him to get a second opinion and that person said he has bipolar 2. I wouldn't care what they have. What I would want to know is, what is it about my son that he's going to struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and what can we do? So I don't care if it's bipolar 1 and my ups are like this. Well, this guy gave me bipolar 2, but this has been a month now. That doesn't matter to me as much as I felt so out of control for 30 days, for 60 days. I couldn't hear people who loved me. I spent recklessly. I went bananas. Let's start there. The diagnostic, fine. But let's start there and let's have that conversation with the psychiatrist. Let's have that conversation with the psychologist. And then again, there's not like one pill. They can just like, oh, you have an infection. Let's give you penicillin. That's not how that works. They're going to say, okay, let's try this and see if this works. That didn't work. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. And it's going to be a slow management that's why they call it med management, until we figure out what for you works. And that's why, again, I just don't put I don't care about diagnostics hardly ever. It does, if someone says I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, that's a light bulb for me. If somebody says I've been diagnosed with bipolar 1, that's a light bulb for me, or schizophrenia. Most of the rest of them is, okay, tell me what's going on in your life. And that's just, again, I don't want to sound nonchalant, but most people are way more complex than their diagnosis, and most situations are way more complex. So, but that's what Rich is dealing with, right? That's what Rich is dealing with a wife he loves, and I'm confident she loves him. And also just kind of went rogue and went out and bought a bunch of stuff, started a business, got mom and dad saying, hey, we love you, and husband saying, hey, we love you, this isn't safe, this isn't smart, this isn't safe. I'm just plowing ahead. We have to deal with that. Sometimes extra information is, hey, here's the diagnosis. Okay, cool. That's excellent. We can take that into account. But let's deal with, hey, we're not safe because we've got a partner who's just spinning recklessly. That's where I like people to start. But does that help?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't put everybody to sleep just then.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Hey, Rich, we love you, man. Call back anytime if you need something. If your wife wants to call in and I can help her create a roadmap, we'll only have a few minutes, but I'm happy to give it a shot if she wants to call in as well.